Good morning. I was going to work on my mermaid painting, the one that I started last week. But then I got distracted by drawing this dragon with all his seahorse friends. So I think I'm going to be going for this instead. Maybe if there's time later, I might shift over to the mermaid painting. This pen is a Pentel art brush. It's a brush pen, and the color is olive green, and it's they do have these replaceable cartridges. I can't get it open right now, but anyway, it twists open, and then you can buy a replacement color cartridge if you need. And this is a squeezable bulb thing, and it has the ink color in there, and you can squeeze it down into the brush when you need more to flow to the tip. Thanks everyone for joining me today. I forgot that it was going to be Memorial Weekend when I scheduled this last week, when I said I was going to be doing it. So I wasn't sure if anyone would be joining me, but I guess most of us don't really have anywhere to go right now anyway. Yeah, I love using these brush pens because they have this really fine tip. And I can get wide strokes if I want to fill in areas for shading, and I can get really fine detailed line work as well with it. Now the paper I'm using is a toned brown, and it is a little bit rough. It's not like a smooth illustration board type of paper, so it has a tiny bit of tooth, and that allows the brush to, it allows me to do a little bit of dry brush shading on here. So people, when they see my finished ink drawings on this stuff, are sometimes surprised that it is ink, and they think that it's maybe color pencil because of the way the brush tip skims over the surface a little bit in areas when I have less ink flowing to my tip. Now I can get it to be a much smoother flow if I were to squeeze this bulb right now and get a lot of ink into it. In fact, let me show you with this other one. So this one I have in a good spot for it right now, so I don't want to mess with the ink flow. But here's another one where I think the ink is flowing pretty strong right now. This is the same, I think, yeah, this is another Pentel art brush. This is steel blue color, but you can see the ink is much more juicy right now on this one because I've squeezed the ink and it flows down into the brush tip. I contrast the green one that I've been using. You can see even on this paper, it's definitely a lot more dry. Now it does get to the point eventually where it dries out a little bit too much, and then I need to squeeze some down, and then it gets really juicy like that blue one, but it'll be too much for the techniques that I'm doing here. And so what I do to get it to a stage where I can use it again for these techniques is I just get a paper towel and I keep brushing it off like this until it gets a little bit more dry, and then I can start working with it again. Yeah, Marla, I still need to check out Twitch. I haven't really given that a shot yet. think right now I've been sticking to Instagram just because it's what I know. It's easiest to stick to the things that we know, right? Yeah, I like the green also for this, and it's a little subtle because on the brown paper it doesn't read as a bright green. I mean, it's not a bright green to begin with. It is an olive tone here. You can see again on the white paper. So it's not a super bright grass green, but especially on the brown paper, that mutes it down even more so that your mind kind of perceives it as more as black and white, whereas it is, brown and green. Halsey Strange, you're asking about my dragon boxes. Can you refresh my memory? I don't remember what those are. I did a few mermaids in this style and technique last week, and I had a lot of fun with them. I had this giant pad of this toned paper. Actually, I have 4 pads of them. I don't know why I stockpiled so much of it. I don't remember what I was doing with it a while back, but apparently I had some big projects in mind. So I decided that it needed to be used up. Let's see, I thought you had those boxes with a print of my dragons and a pin. I don't think that was me. I could be wrong. I have been known to be wrong when people ask me about stuff and I just don't remember it. If you can find the post, then let me know. Sounds like fun. Thanks, Annie. I'm glad you like the mermaids. I had fun doing them also. And it kind of reminded me of how much I enjoy using these brush pens. I dig out my brush pens for October every year, and I do a ton of ink drawings then, and then I sort of don't really do a whole lot more the rest of the time. And it's not because I don't like them, because I love doing them. I just kind of forget how much fun I have doing them. Also because my following generally expects color and watercolor from me, and so one of the frustrating things is that whenever I do a lot of ink drawings, then people start asking me, when are you going to finish the piece? When's it going to be colored? And I have to keep saying, no, it's done. It's an ink drawing. That's its final form. Do I love Pentel products? I do use some of them. I use them for, mainly my brush pen selection. At least my disposable brush pens. And yeah, like I said, this is I guess technically a disposable brush pen, but they do sell their refillable cartridge colors, which is basically the whole back end of this brush. So this whole thing is replaceable. The tip, you can just keep reusing that. So I have a bunch of the refillable cartridges, but they actually seem to last pretty long. And I love the fine point on these brush tips. They always surprise me at how well they perform because they're synthetic nylon and they seem to keep their point forever. I mean, I've never had to discard one of these brushes due to the tip wearing out. Art T. Eva, I love your Shazgix tarot cards. I dived into tarot last year. When I was confident enough to buy my own deck, I went straight for yours. They're unbelievably beautiful and resonate with me. Well, thank you so much, Eva. I'm glad you like the deck. I have been working on an oracle deck, but it's kind of been sidelined. I keep finding other projects to work on, so I haven't had a chance to go back and finish it. It's about halfway done. I think plan was 40 cards, and I've got like 22 of them done right now. So eventually it will happen, because I can't abandon a project after doing 22 images for it. I have to finish that. I have to go back to it. One of the things that I'm finding hard to do with going back to that, though, is because my style has shifted a bit over the years since I started that particular project. It was something that I worried about when I first started the Shadowscapes Tarot, because I knew that any project involving that many cards and images was going to take years. And I was really worried that by the time I finished or I got to the end of the tarot, that my style would be so drastically different that the images wouldn't really gel and mesh well together. Fortunately, during the time period that I was working on the tarot, my style didn't shift that much. It shifted a little bit, but mostly what I experienced during that time was maybe improvement of my skill level, but not so drastically that my first images weren't still something that I liked and felt good about. I still actually, some of the first paintings that I did for the tarot are still my favorite ones even now. But it was something that I thought about and worried about for that deck, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen, that the shift, I mean. So that by the time I finished, I was actually pretty happy with both the beginning and the end paintings. But the thing with the Dream Dance Oracle now is that my style has kind of shifted a lot more in the intervening years since I started that. And I started getting more abstract with my backgrounds and going more textural. And so I can still paint in the style that I started the deck with, the first few images, but I find it harder to want to do that because I really want to do the more abstract-y textural stuff. And so it's been a little bit harder to get myself to go back to complete that. And that's kind of the main thing that's been preventing me from finishing that deck. Let's see what's going on in my questions here. I'm going to scroll back and take a look. What pen am I using? Okay, so for newcomers that have just popped in, this is a Pentel art brush. It is a brush pen. And the ink is water soluble. It does sort of melt out when I paint on top of it. So you gotta keep that in mind if you do decide to paint watercolors over it, which I do, and I'm going to at a later stage of this because I'm going to add some of these shimmery colors for the scales later in the shooting. So it is something that I'm aware of, And I actually like water-soluble inks. I don't like waterproof inks. I get frustrated with them for some reason. I know that's because I don't do the broad washes of paint over my ink line drawings the way some artists do. So the techniques that I use, I prefer to have my ink water soluble. I don't like having stuff that just doesn't move and that's fixed in place. I tried doing this technique that some of my artist peers use, which is where you do a detailed pencil sketch, and then you scan that in, and then you print your sketch directly onto watercolor paper or whatever surface, even canvas. I've known some oil and acrylic painters who do this technique, where they will print their sketch, their detailed pencil drawing, onto canvas and then mount that, and then they start painting. And I tried that because I thought it sounded like a good idea in principle to me, but for some reason it really bothered me that I couldn't get my pencil lines to shift, or if I got to a place where I suddenly changed my mind about what I wanted the sketch to be, what I wanted the composition to be, I couldn't change anything because now it wasn't a pencil line, it was a fixed, printed thing that was just not going to budge. And so I tried it once, that whole technique and process, and then decided I just did not like it, and so I've not done it again. But I do know a lot of acrylic and oil painters in particular seem to like using that technique. Donato is one who I think sort of popularized it. I guess the benefit of doing that technique also is that you end up with this finalized, very detailed pencil drawing that is separate from the painting. But like I said, it just didn't work for me. What I do, so in order to keep my pencil lines from completely smudging, so with this is a quicker thing, right? This is drawing. But with my paintings, for example, this mermaid painting that I was working on, or it's not yet a painting right now, it's just a sketch. In order to prepare it to make sure that the pencil lines don't smudge away completely, so I want to be able to erase them, but at the same time I also don't want to smudge away completely. What I do is I take this is just a large mop brush, and I got water on it. I did this earlier, but I'll show you again. I just swipe really quickly across everything, and it's damp. It's not going to be soaking wet. I just want to wet the entire piece, and that sort of affixes the graphite a little bit. It makes the graphite maybe sink into the page a little bit so that it doesn't rub off as easily when you're painting and when you're just brushing your hand over the sides. So that's a thing that I usually do to any watercolor painting before I start actually doing the painting part. Okay, now, so this brush is getting a little bit too dry for me at this point, so I'm going to squeeze. I'm going to show you what happens when I do this. So I'm going to squeeze over here, and you sort of turn it this way, and you can sometimes see the ink will begin to flow down through this inside clear section. Yeah, there you go. See, now it's a lot. It's not quite as juicy as the blue one, so this is actually perfect. This is where I want it to be. Annie, you're asking, how do I compare these to the Kuretake brush pens? I think I have some of the Kuretake disposable ones too. I like this color. this olive green color. I don't think that the Kuretake had the same color options. They have some different ones, but what I'm looking for is, I don't want super bright colors actually. What I'm looking for are sort of muted, more neutral toned versions of the colors. So I don't want like super bright blue, and I didn't want super bright grass green, and it just happened that Pentel had the color options that I wanted. But as far as the brush tips go, they're all pretty comparable on these disposable pens. And in fact, I found out why when I was over at Creative World earlier this year, right before all of this coronavirus stuff broke out. So in end of January, last week of January, I was over in Germany for this giant art supply expo called Creative World. But it was really enlightening being there, finding out about how a lot of the industry works for, paper and brush suppliers and everything, and how a lot of companies, they all utilize the same suppliers for their basic product, and then they brand it and add their own elements to it. Sometimes they'll change things a little bit, but the basic product is produced by one factory. And so I found out that a lot of the disposable brush pen companies are actually using the same product, which explains why I like a lot of the tips really well, and they all feel kind of the same. I'm not sure if Pentel was one of these, but that was just something in general. But Kuretake does supply a lot of those. Is this a dragon with a phoenix head? No, it's a dragon with a dragon head, but I suppose it does look a lot like my phoenixes also, so yeah, it could be. What other questions have I missed? Let's see, Barbara DeGraves. Hi, I want to mention I have the Monarch Highway poster. I love the way you captured the butterflies in flight. Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that poster and designing it. And Pollinator Partnership is a great organization. I really like supporting them and helping them with my art as well. This is the part of the piece that got me kind of excited. I really wanted to do this. A bunch of little seahorses that are grabbing hold of the dragon, because seahorses are kind of draconian in their way. They look like these little wyverns. Let's see, Mariel is asking, which ones did I do first? I'm assuming you're asking about the Shazcapes Tarot paintings. So I started with the major arcana. I started in order, so I began with the Fool, and I went all the way up to the World, and then from there I started doing each of the minor arcana suits in order as well. So I started with the Ace and then moved up from there to all the way through the court cards. I did try to design my whole scheme ahead of time though, so that everything would meld together thematically and conceptually. So I did work to design the whole deck ahead of time. I talk about that so I have two books, the Art of the Major Arcana and the Art of Minor Arcana, and I have those on my website. Well, I have the Minor Arcana. I think the Major Arcana is out of print again. So you can't get hold of that one unless you manage to find a copy on eBay or something. But the minor arcana I do have, and I talk a lot about how I designed the deck and came up with the concept for the cards and what all the symbolism would be for each of the suits. Danaka is asking, can I say where I studied illustration? Well, I did not study illustration. I studied computer science, and I did a secondary degree also with a second degree of fine art, but I did not go to my school selecting it for the art, so I didn't really have much of a choice in what kind of art I was doing. I went there for the computer science, and the art program was very focused on abstract expressionism and conceptual art. I just had an interview with Haven Gallery, and they actually still have that up on their Instagram, IGTV. So if you want to go look there, you can see the whole interview where we actually talk a lot about my art schooling and a little bit of that experience, as well as Erica. She's the gallery owner, and she also studied art, probably art history, I think in her case though, and talking about art and how to do critiques and assessing art and all that. But we talk a little bit about our experiences in school doing those things. So yeah, to answer quickly here though, I did not study illustration. In fact, illustration is a bad word in that kind of university setting, in that kind of art program. And it is frowned upon, and people do not like it. The professors hate it, and they teach the students to hate it as well, although they couldn't pound it out of me. Because I knew I loved doing more representational style of work. And so even though I wasn't allowed to do it for my projects in class, I did a lot of it on my own. And in that time period, I also did a lot of digital art, because it was sort of the extreme opposite end of what I was expected to do in my coursework, which was so non-representational, because as I said, illustration is a dirty word in that setting, as is representational art, which is always said with a sneer. And so I sort of went the full opposite, because computers were also frowned upon as an illustrator's tool, and so I did a lot of digital art and illustration and things on the side by myself. So all of my illustrative techniques are self-designed and learned, and just a lot of practice in doing this on my own for many, many years. I've been professionally doing art, producing art for 20 years now. 19 years ago was when I first left my software job and decided that I was going to just do the art. I'd been working on the art on the side for 3 years at that point. And so in 2001 was when I finally decided to completely drop the software entirely and just do the art. And that was when I first dove into doing a lot of illustration, as I wasn't really sure what I wanted, like my own direction yet. I hadn't really figured that out yet. I hadn't done the tarot, my Shadow Shapes tarot yet, that came later, although that came fairly early on in the time frame of things. It did happen, let's see, I started doing the tarot in 2004, and I finished it in Well, it was published in 2009. So I think it took me about 4 years to finish the paintings, and then another year or so for the wheels of publication to get things going and get it out there. Because publishers, they need to publicize things, they need to get marketing going, they need to start production, so it takes a while for that stuff to all happen and come together. Now the reason I keep this paper here on the side is so that I don't get pencil and sometimes a little bit of ink smeared on the side of my hand because of the oils in your hand. So sometimes that will reactivate the ink because this is not a waterproof ink that I'm using, and so I just use this to move along on the side. Zephyr Inks, what book is that, please? I think this was back when I was talking about the Minor Arcana, the Art of Shadowscapes Tarot Minor Arcana. Marion Corelli, I wish I had known what the difference between between that and illustration when I was deciding on what to study in college. Oh, art and illustration. Yeah, I know. Me too. Although, like I said, I was not attending or picking the college I went to based on the art program because I didn't think that there was a future career for me in art, so I didn't really bother to look into the art elements of what a school had to offer. And also at the time, I didn't really know the difference either. I had no idea that there were some places that would focus on illustration and where you could do that kind of work. It's just a very different setting from the schools that have a fine art program versus the schools that have an illustration type of program. Do I use fountain or dip pens? I do use both. I use all kinds of pens. But it depends on the look for what I'm going for at the moment. And right now with this one, I want that much more shaded look. I don't want the definitive lines of a pen. So that's why I'm using a brush pen for this. But yeah, I use dip pen and fountain pens. Fountain pens are more just because I like how they feel when working with them. And I like to be able to refill them with my color choice, my preference. So I have a lot of different colored inks, and sometimes I mix them and make my own shadings, because one of the things I really like is having a very light gray, and so I've made a mixture which I diluted with some water, and I like to use that sometimes for more distant backgroundy elements. If you look at my site, or even further back in my Instagram feed to October of 2019, then you can see the stuff that I did for a series. It was called the Undying Tales. It's a project that I was working on with endangered creatures and mythology. And so each piece focuses on something in that theme. And all the pieces, though, were done with colored inks, with toned inks and brush pen. So some parts of it similar to this technique, but I also used, fountain and dip pens. And I think I might have some videos back in my feed from those pieces as well. So if you scroll back, you can probably take a look at those. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where I can do shading with this brush pen on the slight tooth of the paper. Yeah, fountain pens are satisfying to use as well as collect, but they are a bit of a splurge. I have one which is a Pilot that has, so first of all, I found that Pilots have the finest tips. The Japanese pens, the Japanese fountain pens, and I really like super fine lines. So this is my Pilot, but it's also a flex nib, which means that the nib is a little bit flexible and kind of opens up for broader strokes as well as thinner ones, which I really like for drawing with. You know, same as with the brush pen, where you have more expressive line control by having something that's responsive in that way. So this is my favorite one for drawing with. I can't remember what it is, but if you look for Pilot Flex Nib, it should come up. I like some of the other brands of fountain pens too, just like visually, I mean, and holding them, but as far as the nibs go and the finest point nib, it's the Japanese ones. Okay, so I need to squeeze a little bit more ink down in this because it's getting a little bit dry. So I squeeze it and shake it a little bit. Okay, there we go. That might be a bit too much. So I just do this to get rid of some of the ink and then get it to the much drier tip that I want. It's a little bit too wet still, so I'm going to just take my paper towel and soak up some of that ink. If there's too much ink flowing, then I can't get as fine of a point in my lines. That's why I like to have it a little bit on the dry side. Sorry, I'm reading back in the comments that I missed. Thank you for your tips. Oh, you're welcome, Solom. Azim Veris, we can't use watercolor with fountain pens. There are some waterproof inks. I don't know right now off the top of my head what they are. Oh, there is actually even a waterproof brush pen. I think it's the Pentel Pocket Brush. It's a fountain brush pen. You can look that up. My brother really likes using them. It's Dave Law. He does comic book art. But yeah, he really likes using the Pentel brush, pocket brush, because he does paint watercolor over his brush pen inking. It depends on the technique that you do and what you prefer. Like I said, for myself, I actually don't like waterproof ink. I don't like waterproof anything. And in fact, I'm going to do a little bit of watercoloring. I'll do some of the scales here right now because think we're getting towards the end of, not yet the end of the hour, but it's been about 40 minutes, so I wanted to get into some of that before the end. And do a few more little bits here. And here, let me type this, the Pentel Pocket Brush Fountain Pen, Fountain Brush Pen. I like using the bits of seaweed to help the flow of these compositions. They break up the form a bit of the mermaids that I did earlier, as well as this sea dragon. And even though there's no background in this piece, it adds a hint of a setting as well as some sort of framework of composition. Let's do this one more seaweed frond here, and then I'll bust out the paints. Okay, so here we are with this stage. And now I've got these guys, which are so much fun. I love these duochrome. So I'm going to be using the Wicklow. I think I swapped these accidentally. Let's move these around. So this is Wicklow, and it's got a sort of bluish green base tone to it, overlaid with very shiny gold. I don't know if you can catch that there. But I'm going to use some of that, and I might be using a little bit of this moon snow over here as well, which is a silvery iridescent white. These are made by Artistic Isle, and you can see the link to her Instagram on one of my recent posts. I tagged her there, and yeah, she's got lots of awesome stuff. She doesn't have these colors available yet, but they will be very, very soon, because she just told me that she's making them and they're almost dry and ready for people. And let's see, what else am I got to get? I need my water. Oh, sorry, I'm shaking my camera a lot there. Actually, I'm going to pull these out so that you can see more overall what I'm doing. And this is a tray. I just use this to make sure my water doesn't spill and get all over my paper like I just did by flicking water over here, because I am careless and clumsy. And I have spilled my water way too many times across my entire painting in the past that I learned over time that this is something that I needed to do. And I'm using here, this is it's a handmade brush by Tracy Lesbanon, who I'm also working with, and you can also find his Instagram link in my most recent Instagram picture or post. But they're just these really cool looking brushes, and they feel awesome to hold. And this one is a small, stiff, synthetic white brush. That's how he labels it on his website. But I've been really enjoying these, using them. So I'm just getting some of that green. And I'm using these just as some highlights. So I'm not painting giant washes with this. I'm just using it here and there for some highlighted shiny bits in my dragon. I'll zoom in so you can have a better view of it. Yeah, the lighting doesn't really show off the shininess. That's the thing with duochromes, is that they are so much more awesome in person than you can ever see in video or in a picture, because part of what makes them so beautiful is the interaction of light and your movement. So if you're not moving around, if you're just looking at a static photo, you just really cannot appreciate how pretty they look. Let's see, does that lighting work best? Is my tray plexiglass? Yes, it is plexiglass. It is one that I had custom cut out for me from a laser cut place. I didn't go specifically for that. It was just a side little thing that I had them cut out when I was doing some of my frames. But I have it sized and shaped for my usage. See, I have another one. This one. Oh, I gotta zoom back out for you to see it. So I have this odd shaped one because I like having my 3 palettes over here. No, I don't have any palettes right now to use, but I can show you where the position is. And then one over here, and it kind of frames the artwork so that I can work really close to where I'm actually painting and not splatter and drip paint or water in the path as I go. So one of the things I'm kind of really excited about working with Tracy, using his brushes, is that I've been looking for something where I could have natural fibers that were environmentally friendly, and he uses a lot of renewable resource fibers for his brushes, and some of the ones that are trickier, like sables, he upcycles from other things. So that's kind of one cool aspect of Tracy's offerings, and why I'm really excited to be working with him and using his brushes. But I've been trying out a few of them and finding out which ones work the best with my style. And he has a lot of different brushes. Some of them are better suited for other artistic styles, for things that require lots of broad washes or strokes. And for fine detail work, I'm finding the shorter synthetic ones are actually the best for me. He's also working on developing a few that would be really useful for botanical artists, which are going to be super short, because right now the shortest ones that he has are 3/4 inch. And so he's working on some that are going to be even shorter than that, maybe half an inch long versus. So this is a 3/4 inch long. But a lot of times what I use are these super teeny tiny, these Kolinsky Sables. This is a Rosemary and Company brush, and that's only, what, my guess is, so that's probably somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch, so 3/8 of an inch, let's say. But I like these really shorter brushes for more control, especially when I'm doing dry brushing techniques. I don't want something that's super long because that's going to be difficult to control your brush. I'm also going to use some white. I'm actually using white watercolor. I'm not using white gel pen, which is what I frequently use for this kind of stuff, because I don't want as hard-edged of a line. I want this more for a shaded look, and the white watercolor is going to be a little bit more translucent. And I'm not hitting every single scale. I'm just using it for spot highlights here and there. And yeah, because my ink is water soluble, because it's not waterproof, it is going to gain a little bit of a greenish tint if I ever hit any of the edges, which I don't mind, and I actually like how that gives a little bit of a hint of color to this. It makes the green a little bit more evident. All right, let me see what questions I've missed while I've been rambling on here. Oh, what paper am I using? I don't think I mentioned that. This is Handbook Paper Company, Kona Classic. It is an acid-free recycled paper. This pad is 8 by 10. What else did I miss? When did I start doing art? I have been, well, I've loved creating, drawing, painting, whatever, my whole life. So, one answer to that is I've been doing that ever since I could pick up a pencil. And in fact, one of the earliest things I can remember is telling people whenever they ask me what do I want to be when I grow up is I want to be an artist. It's one of my really early memories of that, before I had other people pound into me how impractical of a choice that would be. So yeah, I've been making art, painting, drawing, loving art all my life. But if you want to say how long have I been doing it professionally, I started to dive into professional arena, let's say in 1998, and I went full-time as an artist in 2001. Is this watercolor paper? No, it is not. That's why I'm not going to be doing any washes or any heavy soaking of it. But spot amounts of color like this is perfectly fine to do on regular paper. It's just that if I get too heavy with the watercolor, then it would start to warp the paper, and I don't want that to happen. But that's not my goal here anyway. All I want is some little bits of highlighting. So it doesn't really matter that this is not watercolor paper in this situation. My brush is pretty dry. I mean, I'm not soaking my brush. It's not quite dry brush, but it's just like one step up from that. Because if I get too much liquid on here, then I'll start melting my lines, because this is not waterproof, as I mentioned before. And I don't want my lines to dissolve. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you do go to Tracy's site and decide that you want any of his brushes, if you check out using my name, I think in the discount code, he gives a 10% discount. My name, Stephanie, that is. Just in case you didn't know. Typing the Instagram page name, yeah. Let me type that out here right now. That's Tracy's, and Artistic Isle, which is what these duochrome paints are that I'm using, is, let's see, Artistic. Sorry, I'm looking it up because I need to cut and paste this, otherwise I know I'll type it wrong. Yeah, let's see, did my connection die? Well, I think my phone connection is still going, so let me just continue painting here while my computer refreshes. And then I will also type out Artistic Isle for you guys. Am I back? Can you guys see this? I think my connection dropped there a little bit. I think this is back. Okay, good. Sorry about that. Had some internet connection troubles there momentarily. So a few of the other questions I missed while I was away was, someone asked, do I prefer titanium or Chinese white? This is titanium white, I believe. And what kind of watercolor paper do I prefer? My favorite is Moulin de Roy. It's Canson Moulin de Roy. And it is a very smooth watercolor paper. I use the 300-pound hot press. So some people don't really like it because they feel it's too smooth, or the sizing is a little bit weird for them with absorbing the paint. But for the techniques that I do, it's my favorite, and I use that pretty much exclusively when I'm doing my watercolor paintings. All right, did I miss any other questions there? No, we are getting down to the end of the hour, so I guess if anyone has any other questions right now. Otherwise, I think that I will be doing this again next Monday at, currently, I guess, tentative schedule will be for 11 a.m. in Pacific time, just like today. Juliet is asking the gold leaf I use. It's not miniature, it's called Miniatum. Here, let me type that also. Yeah. How long do I wait? I wait until it doesn't look wet. I mean, the instructions for them say to wait an hour, and I find that's too long because if I wait an hour, then it's no longer tacky and I have a harder time getting the gold leaf to stick. But I wait like 15-20 minutes. As long as you can see that it's not wet any longer, then you can start to use it to apply the gold leaf. Yeah, spell check does that. But thank you everyone for joining me today. Thanks for hanging out with me here and asking questions, and we'll do this again next Monday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I hope you join me again. Thanks.